Okay. We did some previous work with Hudson in 2006 in preparing a long-range facilities plan. So this is we have personal knowledge of your building, and we were able to immediately respond to that request to begin with this. We do thank the district members who contributed to helping us get around the building, talk about the facilities, talk about what they knew about the condition. Tim Erickson, obviously, Jim Stieskel, Laura Love, Perry Scobie, who went up on the roof with us in that coldest day of the winter when we were out here at the site. Nancy Toll gave us invaluable information about the technology of the district. As Tim said, we were hired to perform a comprehensive facility assessment, determine the condition and remaining life expectancy of the existing major mechanical and building components. We did use all our in-house staff, except for which include architectural, mechanical, electrical technology, and site. And we did use Clark Engineering, our longtime consultant, over 25 years of experience with them, to evaluate some of the structural systems. We did look at primarily the exterior building envelope, the interior fixed equipment. You can follow along with this. We're on page 1. The interior fixed equipment, including food service equipment, interior bleachers, auditorium seating, rigging systems, mechanical ventilation plumbing systems, electrical and technology systems, and some of the site items. This assessment identifies the major system components that should be scheduled for replacement based on physical condition or inefficiencies. We did also look at where it was possible to have some cost benefits or savings paybacks as part of this assessment as well. If we go to page 2, the overall concept was to look at this for a life expectancy or out 30 to 40 years. And as Tim said, we didn't assess handicapped accessibility or some of the finishes of the building, flooring, paint, wall tile, those kinds of things. Existing conditions in the report are categorized 1 through 5. 1 is new, 5 is critical, broken, should be replaced, failed or broken immediately. Item 2, that is the prioritization. We went through and prioritized these 1 through 3. 1 is something to be done that should be considered to be done immediately. 2, intermediate repairs or immediate interim repair or replacement, and 3 are long-term needs projected out to 2023. So priority 1 would be 2013 in our estimate, priority 2 would be 2018 range, priority 3 approximately 2023. And these are project costs shown in here, and we did include inflation at a 4% rate, which has historically been pretty accurate for inflation in the last few years. So the summary you have in front of you kind of lists it by the 2013-17, 2018-22, 2023 by the major categories. 7.8 is the approximate project cost, is the estimated project cost for the 2013-17 to the 23.9 million in the 2018-2022 category, and 2023 is 4.2 million, total 35.9 million if all the work is done that's in this assessment. We turn then to section 2, the summary of cost per category. These are a summary page that lists the summary by the major categories, and then below that starts the breakdown of those major categories, and by percentage and by dollar amount. Section 3 is really where we're getting into the meat of the categories. Sorry, let me step back here 1 second to that breakdown. If you look at that breakdown of the costs, you can see the exterior building envelope is approximately 19% of that 35.9 million, of which roofs are 48%, fixed equipment 7%, HVAC 42% of that total, and plumbing 9%. The rest are electrical 9% and so on. So there are some broad categories that will take some dollars as part of the study. If we turn to the breakdown, this page, tab 3, right, section 3. Column B is set up so that it's Hudson, and B and C are the high school codes. If you wanted us to do more, we could insert these into another spreadsheet similarly. D and E are the project codes. Column F is the funding source. At this time, it's all considered to be capital funds. That could change. We break it out. If you do have some other funding source we could consider. Condition is in column G. That's where it's 1 through 5. 1 is new, 5 is failed or broken. And then I is the priority for the priorities, 1, 2, or 3. 1, short term, 2, midterm, 3, long term. So I'll talk about some of the major items in here. The asphalt paving, starting with that, line 207. That's replacing the front parking lot curb to curb, including replacing the Class 5 base. And that's got a 20-year life expectancy as an example. Going down to 4.0, exterior building envelope. As I said, we were out here the coldest day of the year when we walked around the roofs. And at that time, you can't see very much between the snow and the ice, but you've got PVC roofs, which are really very good. They do essentially pond the water, hold the water up there. In some places, there are about 6 inches of water on their roof. Ice on the roof. And so one of the items we have in here is we recommend a thermographic analysis, which is infrared of the roofs that'll help you see whether or not there's any water in the roofs, between the roof membrane and the roof deck. So that's one item. We did see on those PVC roofs, they're good, water is ponding, but we did see where some of the roof drains are higher than the low point. So water is standing, reaching up, not all the way to the roof drains. So we do have a line item in there for replacing, adding roof drains to get the water off of the roofs. You do have some built-up roofs. The district's policy is to replace these with PVC when we get to that point. And we would also recommend adding insulation, as you see in a lot of these items, bring it up to current energy code at the time this is done. And so typically, that's pretty much the scope of the roofs. We did look at these in terms of what is the existing warranty on the roofs. And so the dates recommended for replacement or repair are based on when the warranties begin to expire. This allows you to help budget for when you replace those roofs by giving you the timelines. And we do typically put in here the date when the roofs were installed. As an example, line 261 replaced 1997 built-up roofs. So then that gives you the number of years be added to that for the existing warranty. The next major category on page 2, 4.02 wall systems. This is an example of where you've got some wall conditions where joints are opening up on your exterior concrete fascia, and we would recommend covering that with a more durable material, such as EFIS, exterior insulation and finish system. And so that's got a 25-year life expectancy. On the next page, lines 286 and 287, you have a number of places around your building where you've got concrete block exposed. Some of it is the corduroy block, which is the vertical striped blocks. The joints are opening up, paint's coming off, which is indication there could be moisture in the block. And we do have option 1, covered in EFIS from sill to roof cap, from window sill to roof cap. And item 2 is tuck point. We don't have a number in here. The option 1 is really the better solution because you make it watertight and add insulation. We did go look at all the exterior doors, and generally the hollow metal doors could be replaced with aluminum entrance system, so it's a better system that's more durable and needs less maintenance. You don't have painting of the hollow metal doors and frames, and it's an insulated door as well. We did see a number of locations where your vinyl-clad windows could be improved and energy usage improved by replacing them with aluminum entrance storefront system, which again would increase the insulation value. When we get to the fixed equipment on page 7, 6.01 interior bleachers. It is a priority 3, but there's a general note that when the aisles were added, some of those bleachers weren't brought up to full current code at the time, and but there is some structural steel wear that should be considered and considered for replacement in about 10 years. Similarly, 437, 63 West Gym, manual operation near the end of the useful life, steel wear, structural engineer recommends to replace it in 5 years. Again, because of that, some of the structural components are showing wear. We did look in the kitchen equipment, for equipment and systems. There's a shopping list of items in here, a lot of 2s and 3s. It was recently upgraded, I understand, so some of the materials could be dealt with differently. If you look at 576 through 584, 80, you're dealing with primarily the walk-in coolers. You're seeing some rust on them. You're seeing walk-in coolers that could be upgraded for a 30-year life expectancy. And Jennifer will talk about the HVAC, and again, thanks to Perry, you walked around the roof with Jennifer and helped her get access to those units.
Okay, our first item is the replacing the steam boilers with high-efficiency hot water boiler system. That's a large number. It's $2.2 million. That's a complete gut of your boiler room and replacing your steam system with circulating hot water. Our next big item is the VFDs on all the motors that are 7.5 horsepower or higher. That's a very large energy-saving component.
And the VFD is?
And a VFD is a variable frequency drive. It'll modulate the speed of a motor so that if you don't require as much power from the motor, you don't use as much power from the motor. Next is controls and dampers for the air handling units. We're recommending DDC systems so that you can schedule your building use and keep track of your energy consumption and only use what you need. If you can schedule it for when it's occupied, when it's not occupied. Our next big item is on page 10. It's replacing the air handling units. It's $1.5 million that we would like to replace the air handling units and include chilled water coils. For 13 of the units, these are existing inside units. We also would like to take the rooftop units off the roof. They're all original, I believe, and replace them with units inside so that all your maintenance is inside the building. We also have quite a few items. If you look on page 11, we'd like to replace all the exhaust fans on the roof. Those are all original. They're all ready to be taken off and replaced. They're all on their last leg. On page 12, item 650, we'd like to upgrade the tunnel ventilation system and duct all of that. It's now currently a big plenum, which means it just blows around the tunnel. We'd like to contain it within ductwork, and that's a pretty large number. And also upgrade your existing air handling unit systems with VAV systems that's much more energy efficient. Again, it's sort of like with the VFDs, you just use the motor energy you use. With the VFD, you just use the air and the heating and the cooling that you need at the time. We'd also like to add to your chilled water plant 100 tons, an extra 100 tons of chiller and 200 tons of ice storage so that you can store energy at night and use it during the day when the demand gets high, when it's hottest. It's cheaper to make to make the ice at night and then harvest the cooling in the daytime. That would just cover your existing cooling system. If you wanted to cool your entire building, we would add another 150 tons of ice storage and another 100 tons of chiller. So you'd end up with about 600 altogether, 650 tons of cooling. So that would upgrade your existing cooling system and cool the rest of the building with chilled water. Another big item is a lot of your waste piping under the floors in your toilet rooms is deteriorating, and some of it's had to be replaced. So we're recommending that you at least go in there and with a camera and have a look at it. And we estimate it'd be about $500,000, between $500,000 and $600,000 to fix it if it's bad. Then we come to page 14. You currently don't have a sprinkler system. You have some sprinklers in the auditorium and a few mechanical areas. If you wanted to add a fire sprinkler system, we have an item in there, item 712. So about $2 million to add sprinklers to the building, throughout the building.
I might add, stepping back to the discussion of what's included in the project cost. The project cost includes fees, it includes permits, it includes correlated items, as if you want to replace ductwork above the ceiling, you need to cut and patch the ceiling, so that number for cutting and patching the ceiling is in there. It doesn't, so that's a correlated item, it's a percentage we put in on the project for that. It does include inflation, as I said, currently at 4% per year. Going on to electrical, the big ticket item in here is line 733 and 738. 733 is dealing with the voltage service. 408 works a lot better and works better with the equipment than the 12208. And then you could also include surge protection at the same time. Line 738, the current fire alarm system is analog. The digital fire alarm system is addressable. It's easier to tell which particular head or detector is experiencing a problem. Analog kind of tells you the zone where there's an issue. Then you have to go hunt down where the issue is. The tech group expansion is something that's being considered or being requested seriously. That's line 745, that $134,000. And that includes the architecture to expand the room, make it larger, the walls and so on. There is a request, as you can see on line 747, replace the two existing generators with a single unit separate from the proposed data center unit. Again, to let that operate independently to the system. Under lighting, again, put the lighting on energy management systems. You have controls. You could put it in occupancy sensors or CO2 sensors to help determine that the lights go off if there is somebody, if there's nobody in that room at the time. And also on line 733, 731 and 733, upgrade the parking lot lighting with HID, replace the HID with LED units. Technology, are pretty straightforward items that's pretty much continuing along and pretty straightforward. With that, there's a lot of information in here.
A lot of information there. I just want to reiterate again, or just make a statement that this is a guide. This is something we can use as a reference, and as we're planning for the future, as we look at what long-term is being done with this building. But even if nothing is done with this building, these are items that probably need serious consideration over these periods of years. One question I have for you two is, have you done any projection in terms of payback on energy savings, things like that? have you calculated anything along those lines that to give us an idea? We see what the cost is, we see what the costs are,
Yep.
but
Column M is the one that addresses payback. And as an example, line 593, install VFDs on all 7.5 horsepower or higher motors, is projected to have a 10-year payback.
I think you might be asking, is there a sum total of the payback dollars as it equates to those years of payback period?
We have not summed those, but we can put that, we can assemble that for you.
I think that'd be helpful for us to look at that. And if it could be itemized as well, if you could
Sure.
do that.
Yep. Okay.
It'll help us understand it.
Good. Yeah, that'll help, absolutely.
Any other comments or questions? I know the Facilities and Grounds Committee's reviewed this, and any other comments from that committee or from the board? Any comments or questions?
Question. In terms of the total that you have here of the 35.9, some of these are obviously just maintenance items, right? And they need to be managed. We need to maintain our buildings. But there's obviously some wants in here as well, or maybe some upgrades that, if I look at the old needs versus wants analysis, is everything in here a typical maintenance item that needs to be addressed at some point in time, or are some of these like, boy, there sure be nice to have that?
This assessment is based on our analysis of the physical existing condition. And so you want to be looking at these really over time, and how you phase it in, what pieces you want to bite off and do at one time. You know, we can help you prioritize those and help you work through that. But it is something you should be considering to do.
Okay, so that kind of leads me to my next question then. In terms of budgeting, and maybe Tim or Mary, if you want to talk about this, it's the 2013 through 17, you got $7.8 million that are targeted there as those priority one items. That's a pretty big number if you just spread it out over those 4 years. I'm curious, are any of these items built into the budget currently for the 2013-14 year? And then what sort of plans have we thought looking out then for these items that we know we're going to need to address here from a maintenance perspective?
Well, this is our first glance at it, Bruce, and we can address some of these smaller things within our current budget operating. But of course, when you get into some of the larger things that are taking $500,000 to $1 million, then we're getting into, looking at how we fund those improvements.
Thank you.
I think it's just an important perspective to understand that we're only talking about the high school,
That's correct.
and that there are other assets in this district that are going to need also capital investment as well. So, Dan.
Thank you, Mr. President. 3 questions. My first question has to do with, are you basing a lot of this information on what common industry standards are? I mean, it's for...
Yes, it is.
Okay. Next question has to do with some of the repairs, replacements, especially when you're digging, when you're talking about piping underneath, flooring and stuff like that, you're probably looking at the best case scenario. Because I remember when we remodeled Willow River, it was, when we got some of the cost estimates, it was always, and that's an older building, it was always, well, it's going to be this amount, assuming that we don't run into more. And I would imagine, especially with a facility of this age, that that's a possibility, that when you start digging around, looking, who knows what you're going to run into, which could, escalate the cost considerably. Is that a fair?
That's accurate. We are recommending, though, that you investigate that before you proceed. You can hire a company to send a camera down there to evaluate the condition of all your piping under the ground before you go in, so they can tell you where it's broken, where it's failing, and where you need to replace it.
Would you have based on all of the different areas that you investigated, what just in rough percentages, you would say could potentially involve more skeletons? You know, are we talking about a small percentage, or is there enough of this stuff that, you know, we get into it and we could find a lot more?
Yeah, I don't know if we can
Just-
guarantee.
This analysis, in particular, the sanitary sewer piping, is based on information we received from the district about where they've experienced problems with broken pipe, obviously under the floor. So the camera analysis is to help determine the extent of that. I'd also like to, did forget to tell you that the project cost does include a 10% contingency. So we have dollars budgeted for those unknowns, and every one of these line items has that same 10% contingency in it. So you do have funds to help deal with unknowns or unforeseen conditions as we go along. We also based these on physical observation of the building. We also did look at the existing drawings of your building as we determine quantities. So I think we've got a pretty good handle on it. We can't say we know everything, though.
Okay. My last question has to do with the prioritization. You know, if we do it within the period of time that you've indicated, if we don't do it within that period of time, do you have some type of an escalator or some type of a factor, variable we could use that, you know, if we don't do it within that time frame, you should probably assume another X percent onto that to...
Yes. As we're working with you on this, if you want to change a priority or change a year, when we change the year, it changes the amount of inflation that goes into that line item. So there's a really nice system that helps you budget out and look at different alternatives for how you would want to assemble or package the scope of work to be done. And it does help you look at different scenarios, as I said, but also then budget out multiple years for different phasing of different components.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President,
Yes, Jamie.
just following up on those future costs and the inflation factor, for instance. Am I on? I just want to make sure because I can't hear it. The 4%, that's obviously greater than what our recent historical inflation has been, but is that what you're finding consistent in the industry as far as construction costs going up faster than the rate of inflation?
Yes, construction costs do not necessarily follow the overall state or country's economy. Currently, it's been 4%. It's been as low as 3% in a few years. Last recent past, it's been even a negative number. So we do check it by looking at the engineering news report, our news record, and compare rates from 4 or 5 years ago as we're looking at what could be coming up. So it's not a unknown. We also, based on our experience, we've been doing schools for 60 years, and so we do track the cost of construction.
Okay, so obviously the timing of when we do these things will affect then the actual cost. So the follow-up to that, knowing that your purpose was just to evaluate the current facility and not make any assumptions regarding programming, I'm going to, put that assumption in there if there were to be a change in the function of the building or addition to the building, for instance. One, could that affect when we would want to do some of these major systems sooner rather than later, and would that then bring down the cost if you're doing them sooner rather than waiting for the inflation to kick in?
It's a little bit of a two-sided question there. If you're doing, let's say you're doing an addition, then the work in that area you'd probably want to do at the same time. So then that would be done as part of that addition project. We do think that this work should be scheduled, and if you rearrange it, yes, costs, if you move it up, costs will go down. If you move it out, costs will go up. If you change the use of the building, that might change the number of occupants, might change the ventilation requirements. It won't significantly change the dollar amounts associated with this. Your equipment is reaching the age where you need to be replacing it for age, but also then to improve energy efficiency. Same with the lighting and the fire alarm system. You could wait, but I don't know what benefit there would be as far as fire alarm system, because you would want, if you're doing addition, you want to tie that addition into the newer fire alarm system.
And the final question, and I know it's outside the scope of what you looked at, but you have experience in this area, and that is whether it was expansion of the facility by adding on or moving up, that is adding a second story to the building. What does that do to these systems, and do we have the common areas to be able to support that? How would that logistically happen?
Yeah. The common areas is an analysis of the program, number of occupants, and it's a fairly detailed analysis. What is your current program? What are you planning to be teaching, or what's your educational process going to be in the future? So that has an effect on the size of the addition. When it comes to an addition, if you are building an addition out as opposed to on, above could be a pretty expensive solution because there are a number of factors with that. One, your original building design probably was not designed to handle the second floor. So the wall, the footings, the columns, the roof deck may not have been designed to handle that extra load of another story. When you do that addition, adding up above, you do have to consider the weather. You often, if you're building above, you may have, you need to take the roof off, replace it with a hard surface, because now you want a second floor. So you do have to watch that you don't have water coming into the building and thereby damaging what is there already by the elements. Thirdly, you probably don't want anybody in that lower level when you are building the second floor. Therefore, you do have to find some other accommodation. Summers are pretty short, school years are getting longer, so it makes it more difficult to just say, well, we'll move them, do it over the summer. Depending on the size of the addition, it's possible. But summers are really too short to begin with. Third, fourth, fifth, I don't know how far I am now, the cost generally is more. If you did want to try to span from the outside wall to the outside wall, that's really a hefty roof structure. You still end up having to penetrate the existing roof with all your mechanical, electrical technology, fire alarm, plumbing, and so you can do it, but it does cost quite a bit.
Thank you.
Was that too much information?
Well, it may be, but I mean, I'm just trying to keep it in context of planning this work out
Right.
over a 10 or year or longer period of time, and what makes most sense.
Okay, Mary?
Just the scope of your work. You didn't look at ADA compliance in case something was done to the building, changing the structure of the building.
No, I did not.
Okay.
Mr. President?
Yes.
This is probably a question for the people, not you. Has this type of study been done on this building before?
I think we asked that question once, and that was no.
Not to our knowledge, it hasn't.
Okay, so how has the maintenance on the building been scheduled then in the last 20 years? Is it just something that your maintenance department says this needs looking at and this needs looking at, and you do it?
Facilities and Grounds uses a system that they have to look at maintenance. And so they do a review of major building components, and that's how they derive the schedule of maintenance.
Yeah, we do that for the entire district as well.
It's
Okay,
for
that
the
was-
entire district,
That was
every
going to be my
building.
next question.
Yes.
Is
Yep.
each building gets that facilities and maintenance review?
Yes.
Is there anything in the works for this company or another company to do this same type of analysis for any of the other buildings, some of the older ones or things that we might have problems with?
I don't believe there is, not that there shouldn't be, but we have some newer buildings, but
I think looking at a master plan eventually would be a good idea,
Yeah.
to look at all buildings.
Okay, so Willow River is the oldest building we have in the district? Is that correct?
I believe that's correct.
Yes.
Okay, if we were going to start out with this type of program to handle the maintenance of our buildings, why wouldn't we have looked at Willow River first, because that's the oldest building?
Well, that would be, Willow was remodeled most recently, and the high school being the largest, one of the largest buildings you have, and parts of it are 40 to 50 years old, and haven't been upgraded like Willow has been. Willow was converted over during elementary. It was a remodel back in the 1990s.
Okay, thank you.
Would the fact that we're looking at this building as a potential part of a solution for a solution for the secondary space needs be another reason?
Yes, that would be one of the other reasons, is that you're looking at it in context of possibly changing programming. It fits in with a secondary space as you progress through that process.
Well, I think Board Member Gerke has a good point about a master plan, and I think that's what, as a Facilities and Grounds Committee, we should take a look at, right?
Mr. President, I have a couple
Lynn?
questions. Can you talk me through a couple of these items? One of them being the parking lot. Why do we need to go down to the base course and remove everything? Why can't we look at replacing the areas that need to be replaced, or reclaiming some of that? Or do any of these solutions that we're talking about look at, like the lighting, for instance? I mean, those are improved lighting solutions, but do they need to be done, or are the existing lamps that we have in our fixtures now no longer going to be available? So maybe start with the parking lot, because I have a couple of them for you.
Okay. I didn't work on the parking lot myself, so I'm just going to try to give you what I believe is the generic answer on this. The parking lot is showing areas of wear, and it would be exhibiting that cracks are developing from the original construction back through the original asphalt, and also through, I'm certain this has been overlaid at least once, through that overlay, which is an indicator that the soils below the asphalt are not in the best condition for supporting the kind of loads you're having going across those parking lots. I think that's why it's in there. It's also been discussed, I think, at the facilities level for some time now. So it's not a new item that we just developed. Okay. On lighting, it's an energy efficiency item. And yes, you don't have to replace them. The HID lights, replacing those with LED, they're a much more energy efficient fixture. They do provide more light, and they do have a longer life. So again, it's an energy efficiency item. So this is not all deferred maintenance, it's also upgrade for energy efficiency. Did you have?
I have one on the HVAC. So on the HVAC system that you're proposing, can it go through a plenum, or do we need to have ductwork for it to operate? Because it's, if I recall correctly, that was like $7 million of the total project cost.
Was that, are you referring to the tunnel ventilation? Yeah, it depends on where the plenum is. If the plenum's in the tunnel is probably made of cement. It has a lot of moisture, it's an air quality issue. It's just not a good solution to have it going through the tunnel without, and mixing with all the things that are in the tunnel.
We sometimes do return air plenum back to the unit, but the ducted system for supply gets the air to where it's needed, and especially if you're doing energy management, you can control each room separately in terms of what supply air is being supplied to that room. And if it's a plenum, you're not getting the controls that you would like to have.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I have
Sandy?
just one other observation. You mentioned that there's a 10%, you have 10% built into these figures for things that we might not know about now. At the Facilities Committee meeting, I was there, and I made a note on my page here that your figures, and this is a quote from you, includes collateral damage of 20%. What does that mean if it's only 10% or?
Contingency is separated from the correlated items. Contingency
Okay.
is for the unknowns. The correlated items are for cutting and patching ceilings if if you're doing something above the ceiling. So that would be, that's where that 20% comes
So
from.
the 10% is built into each category as kind of a cushion in case we run into things we don't know we're going to run into.
That's right.
Collateral damage of 20% then is for anything outside of that section, that one item,
That's
that
right.
might result from the repair of that one item.
Right.
So then am I to assume that the figures here are 30% inflated?
Inflated isn't quite the right term.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
30% above what we would, in the best of worlds, and with nothing
Right.
going wrong, that what we would spend.
No, the 20% is part of the construction cost because we have the line item for the item, but then we know that there's more work associated with it. So it's with the adjacencies, or the work associated with installing the light, as an example. Rather than having a line item to replace cut and patch ceilings, we put the piece of the cost of cutting and patching the ceiling in the cost with the light fixture replacement. So that's that 20%. It's just, it could be if we have to cut a wall, we need to paint the wall, patch the wall, and so it's part of whatever penetrates the wall, pipe penetrates the wall, it's part of the cost of the pipe penetrating the wall, as an example.
Okay. Is it an absolute that 20% will all be spent?
No,
All right, thank you.
but often, often, when you talk about the correlated items, it isn't just like a ceiling, but it's also painting, it could be sound system, it could be ductwork that's associated with, that's
Worst
been
case
moved to something
scenario.
else to go in. Yes.
Worst case scenario, something
Right.
happens, we have to fix a wall, fix a ceiling that we didn't plan on, that 20% is there, right?
That could be considered to be part of that, yes.
All right, thank you.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I just had one follow-up to Board Member Hanson's comment about the budgeting, and maybe it's more of a question for Mr. Erickson, but with regard to that 7.8 million roughly that would be estimated through 2017 or 2018, that includes a lot of items I saw on your priority list. One was that it's like new, 2 is in good condition, 3 was satisfactory. You have a lot of 4s and 5s, obviously, in this priority 1 category. Do you have that broken down even further as to items of that 7.5 million that would need to be done sooner rather than waiting closer to that 2018?
Oh, no, we don't. The general approach is priority 1 are the items that should be addressed sooner. 2 could be put off, 3 could be put off later. We can give you the totals by 1, 2, or 3, if that's what you're asking for.
Well, I already know that, yeah.
Okay.
I see that in
Yeah,
there, what the
right.
total is for priority
Okay.
1. But within priority 1, for instance, are you recommending that these exterior walls that have these large cracks in them that you're talking about, that sounds like something we should probably get to sooner rather than waiting until 2018 or 2017?
That's correct.
All right.
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay.
I think that would be something that we can talk to ATS Center about more as we drill down more into the details of that first 5-year section and how we can address some of those items and prioritize again.
That's why I just want to know, yeah, beyond this meeting, there's a plan to do that
Yeah.
work with Jim Stayskull on that. All right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Good discussion, good report. Thank you very much, Bill
Thank
and
you very
Jennifer.
much. We appreciate, again, working with you and your team.
Okay, we're moving on then to the next report, 2B. City proposal and estimate for a public utility facilities study regarding the UU property. I know that we all around this table know that we had approached the city last spring regarding, as well as the town and the county, about the feasibility of extending utilities to the UU site in anticipation of use of that site for secondary space for solutions. The city has been working over the summer and now has presented for us a cost and a proposal for doing that feasibility study. So what they were reviewing were the legal and the technical aspects of what it would take from their side to extend those utilities out to that site. And they have a cost now for us, and I'll let Tim give you the details of that, and we can discuss it.
Okay, sure. The city did respond back with some cost estimates and some information on what they'd be looking at as they work through a feasibility study to look at extending city water and sewer out to UU. The breakdown, we're looking at a total cost of somewhere around $16,000 is what their estimate is. And so about $12,000 of that's for engineering review and about $4,000 for city legal and staff time. It looks, what they're going to be looking at, as we had asked them if they could tell us a little bit more about what the scope of that work would entail. They replied back that they'll review existing and proposed capacity of the sewer lift station. They're going to verify capacity of their wastewater treatment plant, review capacity of water service to the site. There's kind of a laundry list of items here. They'll also review Wisconsin statute and administrative rules for extension of sanitary sewer and water service outside of the municipal boundary, and review alternative options and legal framework. As part of our question and answer back and forth with them, we thought it may be a good idea if they could address the legal portion first before we move ahead with the other pieces, the engineering review and getting the study back. So they're working on getting a response back to us as soon as possible, and so we'll hear more back from them as far as what they'd look at legally and what the timeline would be before moving forward with engaging in a feasibility study.
So there's a fair amount of discussion at the Facilities and Grounds Committee about moving forward with a feasibility study, and not knowing the end result of that or the resolution to what the city might decide. And of course, the city can't be in a position where they're deciding before we get the determination from the feasibility study. So my point is that spending money for a feasibility study when it may be a dead end for us is something we're cautious about and have talked about as a committee. And that was the reason why we're hoping to and proposed to the city that we split it to just the legal. Because if the legal comes up indicating that it's really not a possibility, then at least we haven't spent the entire amount, and we've gotten an answer regarding the potential for that site, regarding extension of city utilities. So, any other comments from the committee or any questions from the board?
Mr. President, you may have mentioned it, but did they say in that response what the timeline would be?
Yep.
They had to do this study 60 days. We're just, one of the questions again back was, well, let's look at this maybe and split it into two parts, legal and then the rest of the feasibility study. So they're looking at, they'll get back to us on the timeline for the legal portion of it.
Just note their original thought was it'd be 6 months, and so that by comparison, it's shorter than we thought.
Mr. President,
Yeah.
question, just follow up on the legal expenses. I know the city has their own attorney, and it's not unusual for the city's attorney to evaluate, questions that come to the city. So are you indicating that they're having to go outside the city's attorney to, is that why we're paying these additional costs? I guess
Yeah.
I'm a little confused on
I
where the line is drawn between what is appropriate for the city attorney to be researching and investigating versus them having, is that a fair question?
Yeah.
I can't answer the question about whether it's solely city attorney work or if it's another legal resource, but generally when one governmental entity asks another to do something, and has been a practice of the city, if we request something of them, we normally will pay the fees associated with that request.
So even if it's a city attorney, we would pay their,
Yes, because it's something outside their normal scope of what they'd be doing.
okay, thank you.
Other comments or questions regarding that. We'll have more information to come as we hear from the response from the city. Okay, moving on then to the final report, secondary space for learning draft timeline. And Tim is going to take this one too, but I just wanted to mention that this timeline would be used for planning that, obviously, in culminating in a referendum for a secondary space secondary space solution. And it'll continue to develop. It's been a difficult task for our staff to really kind of put this on a linear type of plan, particularly when we don't know some of what's down the road for us. But so it'll continue to develop, and we have to ask for your patience to bear with us as we change potentially change the timeline. So, but more information will be gathered, and we'll keep you posted on that. So, Tim.
Sure. So I'll just walk you through the pieces of a timeline, but maybe we'll have you go to the second page down at the very bottom first so that you get a feel for the referendum dates. And the potential referendum dates will be August 12th, 2014, or November 4th, 2014. So those would be the target dates that we're working towards. And again, there are pieces of this that are going to be filled in as we go and as we gain more information. But if we start and just review the top section, and that front section was a site evaluation and selection, looking at county UU public water and sewer study, of course, just what we were talking about previous to this agenda item. And you can see the timeline that has been laid out. We're hoping that somewhere yet this month we'll have some more information on that first phase, which is the legal phase, and what the timeline would be for that to address those legal issues first. As we go through this, there'd be a consideration, item number 4, be consideration of public utilities feasibility proposal from the city by board committees, and it would go to Facilities and Grounds and Finance for consideration in October and September, and then review and action taken by the board on the City of Hudson feasibility financial proposal. So that's the October 8th meeting. So next month we expect to, we're hoping the board will be able to take action on that. And then conduct the study. We're estimating there, we're adding a little bit of room there. So that study, we're estimating October 2013 through March 2014.
Tim, we have talked about adjusting that to January.
Yes, that's right. We did. So yeah, because of the timeline that was shortened in the response that we got back from the city, that would be October 2013 through January 2013. Or 2014, yes. Thank you. So, and then we've got, from there, there's communication and coordination with the town of Hudson and St. Croix County, and that would be regarding, as some of you know, that the county has authority over the Hudson Area Sewer Service Plan, and they work with the city on that, and so that would be another joint effort of information gathering and working together to move towards that end. And then there'd be potential negotiation with the city, assuming the terms of the agreement are agreeable, and then action taken by the city regarding extension of utilities to UU if we're tracking on course there, and then action taken by the board regarding the use of county UU. Moving on to that second section, and this is county UU, and this is on-site well and septic. This one is a little bit easier. We went through the request for proposals to study well and septic in depth, and that was in July. The authorization by the board president and vice president to approve a contract, and we did do that with Bodwin. And they are going to be starting out on the site on the 16th. So next Monday they'll be out on the site and starting to do their testing. So they'll qualify qualified well and septic proposals, and then, as I said, we'll be conducting that well and septic feasibility study. And you'll get a review of that between October and November board meetings. And then we'll verify septic and geotechnical shows no major issues. And then, of course, we've got the approvals, coordination, communication with the different bodies of authority there, the DNR, the DSPS, which is another state agency, St. Croix County and the town of Hudson. And that's assuming you move forward with on-site utilities and potential consideration of alternate sites, depending on what the outcome of the studies are, and then develop a site criteria, and again, to be determined if applicable. So that addresses the county UU and where we're going with that. And the next section is site conceptual planning. So reporting of geotechnical soil borings. Again, that will come second after we get the report back on the on-site utilities, so where septic system could be located, where wells should be located, and the setbacks. Then we'll be able to pinpoint, we'll be able to have a greater idea of where a building could be sited on the UU site. And then we do geotechnical borings to determine the capacity of the current soils to handle a building. And we do that on any site. So that's not just UU, but that would be done on any site. Design the site conceptual plan, so again, site planning, and then working with our county and local government, so regarding environmental corridors, slopes, roadway access and improvements. And then again, we're doing a lot of work, joint work with the county and local government entities, and then refining a site conceptual plan. And then evaluation and narrowing of site options is the next section. And preparing initial site and building program, that is happening right now. You've heard the presentation from Catherine Kruishnik from Hoffman as she works through that. And then we've reviewed the ATS&R high school study report as part of the overall planning process and information gathering. And the evaluation of the potential to reconfigure the existing high school and middle school for options. So looking at how do they fit into the overall plan of secondary space for learning. And we've got items 4 through 17. Again, that timeline will be developed as we move along. And then the target date, board approval of a referendum resolution has to happen by May 13th or August 12th, depending on that August or November date for referendum. So any questions?
Any questions?
Mr. President?
Yeah.
You know, this is obviously a hot topic, been a hot topic for a long time. But, you know, this also needs to have that sense of urgency to it, because when we were, you know, talking about this even through the last election process, it was, you know, one of the most talked about topics. If we're going to hit that April date in terms of the review and approval of final solution to try and move towards the referendum of 8/12, what sort of prioritization are we working on to get these dates filled in? Because I would think that, you know, for these blank spots that we have up there, you know, we work very diligently with our teachers to prepare SMART goals. You know, these are our SMART goals, right? I mean, this is where we are working to finalize these plans to make this happen and work towards taking action. It's obviously an issue that we have to work towards. So when do you think we'll get these dates defined so that we can move towards this?
Well, some of this is going to hinge on the site itself. So if we get through the study and UU works, then we can progress a little faster. If we get through the site and UU is, let's say UU is the site, but we've got to bring city utilities in, that's going to be a longer process. And that's kind of the way we have down at the bottom, that we're going to have to have some flexibility with this and fill in, because there's certain things that we can't control. However, that being said, I think once we get some answers in October, November from the analysis out on UU, that's going to help us fill in a lot of these blanks at that point.
So that just, thank you. That brings up my next question then. So let's look at UU. If UU doesn't work, or even if we keep moving along and we find something else, because we get through the legal phase, then we're going to have additional research that needs to be done, right? It's not just the legal portion. We're still going to have more that needs to happen. So what sort of contingency plans are we building into our planning for potential backup sites? Because ultimately, just going forward with one plan, I don't know is something that will behoove all of us. I think we need to make sure that we're taking into consideration additional site options now as we're looking through this. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, I can do that, Tim. The committee has discussed that, and the committee's been very much aware and had a lot of discussion. The Facilities and Grounds Committee have discussed the same point that you're making, Bruce, regarding making sure that we've got other options, that we're not left with another extended timetable now starting over looking for sites. But we're currently looking at criteria right now that the board has set, and additional criteria to research other sites, and that's going to be one of our next agenda items at the Facilities and Grounds Committee. So I agree with you, and I believe our Facilities and Grounds Committee agrees with you as well, that we have to find other options. And so if Plan A doesn't work, Plan B, C, we've got some homework done in order to be able to move quicker.
Thank you.
You guys want to comment?
I just have one question. I don't know if there's been any discussion about this. I don't think there has been at facilities, but is there a drop-dead point for the number of students that would be allowed on UU with a private well and septic, at which point we would say, okay, city, we don't want to talk about this anymore. I'm trying to get city water and sewer out there. In other words, if we can put 1,000 students on there based upon what the well and septic reports are we then ready to go forward with a school that will house that many students and tell the city we're not going to go through that whole process of trying to get city water and sewer out there? Or are we going to try to get it out there no matter what the well and septic assessments for UU come in at?
I'm not sure I understand the question well enough to answer it. My assumption, my first thought is that we're still working on programming to understand, what kind of facilities are needed yet as well. So there's a couple of questions. One of the questions is, what kind of programming are we, what kind of programming is, how is the programming that we've defined and decided on driving the design? And so the design will help us understand what kind of facilities needed. At the same time, the next question in my mind is what's the capacity then for UU, and how do the two match up? Those two questions, the kind of facilities we need and the capacity at UU. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question though.
Well, let me rephrase it. Let me say it, to use Jamie's language, we'll rephrase it. I know that this board's goal has been to build a four-year high school. That's been a goal from quite a number of years now. That was the objective. So if the well and septic studies on UU say that we cannot do that, but we can do 1,000 or 1,200 students, which would very adequately accommodate like an 8-9 building, a building for 2 grades instead of 4. If we get that report back from the septic and well people saying we can do that, are we then going to say, oh, this is great, we can use land that we have, we can build a more modest facility, but it will solve our problems? Yeah. Would we then say to the city, well, you know what, we're going to go with this direction and we're not going to spend another 6 months working on trying to get city water and sewer out there just so that we can get a 4-year school on that land?
Thanks.
That's my question.
I get it. It's a good question. I don't know that I can answer that as a personal.
I just wondered if there had been any discussion about it.
But I think it's a good question, because I think it's something that I think we'd have to have discussion about as a committee and as a board.
Cool.
And I don't know, I just want to make one comment, Sandy. I don't believe that it's been the goal of this board to have a 4-year high school. I think it's been the goal of the board to create a secondary solution in whatever form that might take. You know, I mean, we've looked at other options. We've looked at 3-year high schools. We've looked at two middle schools. I mean, those are all options that are still on the table. So I don't think it's correct. And maybe I'm wrong, but this is my understanding is that it hasn't been the goal to have a 4-year high school necessarily.
Well, that's the perception of the public, so that's why I'm phrasing
We'll
it that
help
way. And I
them
think
understand that it's not.
I think our goal, I think what was left on the table is a 4-year high school and a 3-year high school. No, the 4-year is
3.
gone. 3-year high school is what's left on the table?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Jamie.
Is that better? Okay. This up-down thing, I don't have it. No. Counterintuitive. All right.
Yeah, it is counterintuitive.
But I guess I would just join in Sandy's question to the extent that I think we've got this issue to tackle at our next committee meeting of facilities, because we're talking about criteria for potentially looking at other land. And I've always been about having options and trying to be the most cost-effective. And, you know, in all of this analysis, if it costs too much to build or it's not possible to build our own septic system and operate it for what it could cost to maybe buy another piece of property that already has, you know, city sewer and water access to it, for instance. I'd want to be able to make that, you know, and I'm with Bruce, I want to have a contingency plan. I've asked about that since I've gotten on the board. And so I think we should be building that simultaneously at our next meeting, because I think we do need to make a recommendation to the board as a whole. It's our committee's job, is maybe, you know, maybe it will come out that, you know, we find out we can build a school that houses enough students in the foreseeable future to relieve the secondary space pressure, and it's best for all concerned to get it to the voters in August of 2014. If that's the case, I think that's what our committee will make, and then maybe the board as a whole will adopt it, maybe it won't. We have to go back. But I think we should be continuing to have these discussions, and
Yeah.
I think we are.
Yeah. Mary.
Mr. President, those questions are certainly good ones, and going back to one of the work sessions, and I think it was one of the initial ones, we had a preliminary conversation about that, and there was some interest in board members. It wasn't really a consensus that if the information comes back on an on-site system that would work for a certain size, the board would consider that. I would also think that at that time it might be worth considering to ask our public, survey the public in their interest in what size school and what they're interested on a particular site. Some of the questions that I know the Facilities Committee is talking about.
Other thoughts or comments or questions? Good discussion. Appreciate it.
Just one
Right,
comment.
yeah.
I'll just reiterate again, since the last time we talked about this, is I just think we have to match kind of our priorities and what's important to us to what's feasible and what's out there, and act and get the best possible option for what we have right now. I just think that I think buying a piece of land and then without having it to be turnkey, I for one, I'm not up for buying a piece of land as a step one and then building is step two. So I'm with the other board members. I'm just, you know, I think it's time for us to act on this, look at what's possible, and make a decision and go with it. So,
Okay. Thank you, Brian. There's still unanswered questions, and that'll help us guide this decision. But it's helpful to hear the board's feelings and positions regarding, you know, where they're at in terms of how we move forward. So, okay. I think we're ready to move on to the superintendent's report, first day enrollment.
This is always a little difficult to share this information because some people catch on to it and use it as if it is our official enrollment. And I want to really emphasize that this enrollment is not official yet. That comes on the third Friday in September, on September 20th, and we will report to the board that official enrollment October 20th. So with that being said, we will report on the first day student enrollment, and that's the first day for students in grades 1 through 5 was September 3rd, and then for kindergarten, it's September 6th. So you have the numbers before you, and we just should realize what these numbers represent. They represent the students that are in classrooms on those days, and also students who have excused absences. So there are other students that have registered that we may not know of that we have to follow up with. And these numbers fluctuate daily throughout the year and will fluctuate before the first official enrollment count in January. So with that being said, we'll turn our attention to the numbers themselves, and we have been tracking the kindergarten enrollment, and I know the board has been concerned about that for a period of time, and the kindergarten enrollment at this time is 353 students. That's compared to the registration number that was in February, and following registration we had 306 students, so it has increased, as it does every year, and we continue to reiterate that. This represents what we'll see in the next couple years, a downturn in the births that these students represent. And it also, for a few years, we're going to have students who are coming in with lower birth rates. And then that's followed by years of record birth rates at Hudson Hospital. So for a few years, we would expect that these kindergarten numbers would be down. Certainly, this is the only class that's in the 300s or below 400, and we would just expect that for a number of years. When we switch to the largest class, that's the 9th graders at 479 students, again on the first day. And if we just compare that to January 2013, so that was the official count in January. There are 2 official counts during the year, one in September and one in January. When that class was in 8th grade, they were 440 students, so that's been a growth of 39 students as they entered the high school. If we take that number and just look forward, because that's certainly our interest as we look at space, and we take the students in grades 6th, 7th, and 8th currently, just by first day enrollments, and we'd add 39 students to each of those grades, knowing that in 3 years, all of those students will be in the high school. If that continued, the number that's currently was first day, plus 39 for each of those grade levels, we would have 1,887 students in 3 years in the high school. So that's just speculating, looking forward. Any questions about these numbers before we turn to the next page and look at them a little bit in relationship to the official enrollments from last year? All right, and Diane, if you turn to the next page. This is a little bit apples and oranges when you compare that first day to this count. There are numerous things on the page in our official count that you're familiar with. So doing a straight across total analysis with that page we just have just doesn't exactly work, and I'm just going to point that out. So if we take Holton's enrollment, and if you go to the column where it says DPI totals on the right, in September, so a year ago, 2012, 217 students. That can't be compared to the first day enrollment. It's a different time certainly, but the students that are counted on that first day are different from the 217 that's right there. So I'm just going to demonstrate that. So if you look at the 217, what you have to do to try to compare it to that first day, as close as you can get it, you have to take out the 3 students who are OEOD, which means open enrollment out of district. So those are Hudson students that are going someplace else. So you have to subtract that from the 217. Then you have to add in the open enrollment ID in the second to last column. So those are open enrollment students in. And now you have Holton's total enrollment by official count that was in seats on that day, and then excused absences. So that would be the closest that you can get to this. So you can't take those total numbers anywhere on the page and just look back at the first day enrollments and say, okay, this is how they look. So when I do the calculations and compare them to the official count in 2012 in September, and again, it's going to fluctuate before the official count. We're down 4 students, if we compare apples to apples as much as we can in this. The elementary is down a little, the middle school is down a little, but the high school is up. And so doing that math, again, this is only going to last for the first day. It's probably different today, in fact, when we look at students. But we don't really have a good comparison until that official day where we can compare this chart to the official day enrollment. Questions or comments? It will change, that we will know. And I'll be back in October to talk more about these enrollments.
Okay. Do we have any citizens request to speak? No, we do not. Okay. Then we'll move then to item 6, which is topics for action, the 2013-14 proposed budget and levy. Leave Dan and then Tim.
I'll let Tim lead this, and I'll just help fill in some of the blanks.
Sure. Yep. You bet. If we go to the first page. Okay, this gives a summary of what you've seen before in a format that you've seen before, which is our costs by object. So it categorizes things in order. But I'm gonna run through the summary of major budget assumptions. And when we look at the increase in the total tax levy, that's a 2.34%. The consumer price index for 2012 is 2.07%. The CPI is of course a measure of inflation, so that gives you a little bit of a comparison. Our equalization aid is estimated at this point to go up about $3 million. That's based on a July 1st equalization aid estimate, and that is an approximation by DPI, and that's not final until October when you approve a final budget. That number is also can go up or down. There's certainly a likelihood the number could go down. It could go down as much as 1%. So, and maybe somewhere around that $200,000 to $250,000 mark. This includes previously board-approved new staffing costs. There's a health insurance increase. As you know, we did move to partially self-fund health insurance, and that model is estimated to save about $650,000 for this year, and then planning for future savings as we go. The increase of 1.24 student membership aid units, Mary talked about the counts here. The membership aid units are slightly different, and they're based on the previous year in the funding formula. So we also estimate a decrease in federal aid from sequestration of about $118,000 in total. And the under levy is about $13.2 million. So that's the amount that you could add on to this levy, but you won't, for sure. But it's the amount, that's something in Hudson that is pretty unique. Districts do under levy. We do see maybe a quarter, last year about a quarter of districts, or in 11-12 rather, about a quarter of districts under levied. but no one under levies as much as Hudson has in the past few years. So that's certainly a sign of efficiency. Some new items that this budget includes are safety and security improvements. We have a plan in place to put some safety and security improvements in all of our buildings, and some of those things have already been done. There's a pre-referendum contract and estimates for UU studies, and then there's ITS infrastructure and equipment upgrades, and so those total about $750,000 of really more along the lines of one-time costs that we wouldn't normally see in this budget. And so they add, it's important to remember, those costs add about 1.5% to our total expenditures, but certainly necessary items. So if we get into the actual budget and the line items, you can see the presentation of the 12-13 budget and the proposed budget and levy for 13-14. Property tax, the line item, of course, that's in the general fund is our one of the largest revenue sources. That and state aid are the two main revenue sources for the school district, and that is 2.72%. And again, the levy total is 2.34%. So that we also have a component for debt service that includes, but not on this line item. We also, if we just go run through and highlight some of the items here, again, equalization aid, which is line 621. And that's estimated to go up about 12.9%. Again, that's the estimate at this point that the state gives all school districts on July 1. And then in October, they'll come back and they're going to give us a final based on statewide data, where school districts wound up their year. So it's a formula that is, the best estimate we have is what the state has, because they have to collect all the state information on all school districts. So that is an estimate. Again, I just want to stress that. So total revenues are $53,620,736, and then we'll move down into the expenditures. Lines 100, 200 are salaries and benefits, and they're at $38,065,000, about a 5.47% increase. Other items more notable under 300, which is other purchase services. And so you'll see some of those items, the three items I talked about up above, they'll be falling in the 300 and the 500, which are capital objects. So that's what's driving the increases in those line items. And let's see here, moving down, and then we have an interfund transfer to special education. That is the two funds, special education fund and general fund, are linked together, but they're separate funds. Special education accounts for the expenses of students on individual education plans. And then we get down to a bottom line of total general fund expenditures of $53,620,000. And again, a 6.98% increase. 1.5% of that are those one-time out of the ordinary expenditure items. This budget is presented as a balanced budget. You can see there's no surplus or deficit. And moving down to the next line item, the projected unassigned general fund balance is $14,091,000. So that's what the projection is. And if we look at that as a percentage of expenditures, it's 26.28%. And board policy is a unassigned fund balance between 25 and 30%. So we're at 26.28. And then the very bottom, you can see the breakdown in the debt service levy. So we pay this on our bonding, and most of that was previous voter approved projects for remodels, new schools such as Rivercrest, et cetera. That's $4,126,000. And then we add in the general fund levy of $25,743,000. We get a total levy of $29,870,000. So that's a 2.34% increase. The district doesn't levy, many districts levy for community education or community service project, or community service operations. We do not do that. And so There are no levies in for that, or there are no levies in for food service. Those are all primarily user-based or fee-based operations. So, any questions on that page?
Yeah, Tim, one question is, out of the 3 million or so for the salaries and benefits, how much is that, of that 3 million's, that increase from last year? Excuse me, 2 million. It was 36 million last year in the budget, and it was about 38 million this year. How much of that is insurance versus, you know, other costs?
Well, in general, we've got about $500,000 in benefits. I just say overall benefits increases in this, so that would be health insurance, it would be payroll taxes, WRS, et cetera.
Okay. And then the other question was, didn't we have some extra, didn't we have some funds from this year's budget we were able to pay for some of those security improvements in last year's budget?
Yeah, we had we laid out a plan which was actually over 3 years, and so part of that plan was put into place over the summer, and so we were able to use last year's budget dollars. But this is our estimate for the 13-14 year.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure.
Any other questions?
Question.
Bruce?
Thank you. The expenditures in the lower portion, capital objects, is that where the items would fall for the ATS&R review, or would that fall across other sections as well?
The ATS&R review would be normally under that 300 other purchase services.
Okay, and currently none of that 7.8 that's factored in potentially over the next 4 years is figured in any of the budget for 2013-14?
We've got some smaller items in our capital projects budget, and then those will go before the Facilities and Grounds Committee for final approval. We're able to tackle some of those smaller things on there, but like I said before, it's when we get into things that are $500,000, then that is going to consider more discussion about absorbing that into the budget. Now, you know, under levy's 13.2 million, so there's room to do that, but you know, that would be, we'll have more discussion about that going forward.
Yeah, I guess I'm just curious in terms of that. That's a pretty big number, the 7.8 million, and if we've already got the proposed budget and levy for 2013-2014, now you're looking at that again over a much condensed period, so those numbers are going to be much bigger. So I just would be interested to learn how that might be reviewed here. Second question then, this equalization aid, it's new to me, of course, so I'm trying to figure it out, but obviously to get a balanced budget, those dollars that are added there, it's a pretty significant increase at 12.91%. Can you speak to previous equalization aid increases? I understand it's probably a very complex mathematical algorithm to come up with it, but I'm just trying to understand how that is such a large increase this year.
Yeah, that's a good question. It is such a significant part of the budget. The formula, and I won't go into the formula because it's very complicated, but our history has been, we're pretty much evenly aided, I would call it, between tax levy and state equalization aid. Now that does move up and down depending on the year, and there are different factors that affect that, and what affects that is what happens to other districts out there and their budgets. What affects it is looking at property values. If property values per student increase, there are mechanisms in the aid factor to redistribute aid to other districts. Likewise, a district that has low property value per student would get more aid. But over the past few years, we've had ups and downs in our aid. This is a pretty big increase, but again, our best estimate is what the DPI is telling us because they have access to all of the statewide data. But we've seen our aid decrease a couple of times over the past 6 years by 10%. So we've seen large reductions in our aid as well over history, if you look at more recent history. The reductions, those two reductions were probably the first time ever in the history of the school district. I mean, I talk to people, have we ever experienced this before? And we just, those are kind of historical things that happened 2 times to us. And, you know, we can't say for sure whether that will happen again, but it's all based on economic conditions and the state's budget.
Thank you.
Mr.
Yeah,
President,
Dan.
I didn't bring my notes from our earlier spring meetings, but, you know, as we've indicated in past board meetings, you know, this budget evolves as we get more and more information. But Tim, when we first started working on this in the spring, and we were looking at a much higher percentage increase in the levy, can you explain again, you know, what we refined? Was some of it because we didn't have all of the equalization aid numbers in at that point in time? Was that a big piece of it, or did we reduce some of our expenditures?
Yeah, that the equalization aid estimate comes out in July from the state. So when we're working prior to that, we don't have that number. So what we're doing is we're working on using modeling to try and help us pinpoint where we think that aid revenue will come in. And again, a complicated process, even more complicated when you don't have access to all of the state information. So we work with Baird on that. They have a model that we use, and that's what, you know, actually we're not too terribly far off given all the facts and circumstances on this. But yeah, the tax levy was at 3.56% when we started out. And then as we gathered more information and went through more budget development, now we're down to the 2.34% level.
And the CPI is what, about 2.10, 2 point?
CPI for 2012 is 207. Currently, if we look at up through the most current period, current 12 months, it's running about 2. This levy assumes that we will see slight decreases on homes. When we look at mill rate, because the mill rate's actually coming down, we're seeing an increase for the first time in several years of property tax value, so that's pushing the mill rate down. So overall, in general, you would see a decrease in the tax that a home is paying for this year.
Okay, thanks.
Tim, would you say the estimation of the equalized increase for aid is a conservative number?
We're using the state estimate.
Okay, so it's just what we're doing.
Yeah, I'd like to say it might be conservative, but I don't really know. That's, everybody's kind of in that same boat at this point, and districts kind of hold their breath until October comes and you get the final estimate.
Okay. Other questions?
Mr. President?
Yeah.
So since we're talking about it, I mean, my challenge with this budget is right around the expenditures. And if I looked at our increased costs, if I looked at the inflation, call it 2%, that would be about a $1 million increase just to keep up with inflation. And then student growth is, maybe around 85 students, and our cost per student, call it $9,500 per student. That's $800,000, so it's about $1.8 million to basically keep up with inflation and keep up with our student growth. And the increase in these expenditures is $3 million. I also know that we want to make some increases in terms of safety and security. There's some things we want to do around, some of the stuff we talked about with pay and benefits. But I'm still challenged with a 7% increase, roughly 7% increase in expenditures when, we have those underlying kind of drivers. And that's been kind of my challenge on this. So, and it continues to be my challenge. I thought we were going to do some work on the property tax increase and get it below 2%, but, you know, from what I'm seeing today, it's still at 2.7, so.
We've got, well, it's the levy is a 2.34% increase, and with mill rate going up, that results in a slight reduction in property taxes again. But if you look at over time, what's happened over the past few years, where the district has had those 2 years where we've lost 10% of state aid, and we've pulled back and we've made reductions, and you certainly all remember that. But if you look at applying the inflationary factor, the CPI, to each of those years going forward, and where we'd wind up with expenditures, this might surprise you, but we'd be about $2.1 million higher in expenditures if we just kept pace with inflation over the last few years, and that includes negative about a 3% decrease during the downturn in the economy. The other thing to keep in mind is that in 11-12, the latest data from DPI, statewide data, shows the district as the lowest spending district per student in the state of K-12 districts. And then couple that with your $13.2 million under levy. You know, is there some catch up here? Yes. Part of that number is driven by some new staffing costs as well. So we have a number of different items, but when you look at the big picture of this, I think over the years the board and the administration have been very conservative. We have some catch up to do. We were able to approve some new positions, which are going to be greatly helpful for our students. Again, and then you couple that with the academic performance, which you've all seen information on over the past few months.
We ready to entertain a motion regarding this proposed 2013-14 budget and levy?
Mr. President, I propose that we approve the proposed 2013-14 budget and levy.
Is there a second?
Second.
So a motion by Dan and a second by Lynn. Any other discussion?
Does this require a roll call vote?
You can request it.
I will request it.
Okay. We'll have a roll call vote. We'll start down here with Sandy.
Gerke, no.
Hanson, no.
Holland, aye.
Robson, aye.
Bell, no.
Motion passes 4-3, and so the proposed budget moves forward. I'm going to suggest, given the time that we have leading up to the annual meeting at 7 o'clock, that we postpone the next items on our agenda, except for the group that's here tonight to receive an honor from the State Title I Award. So we'd like to have Mary, if you could kind of introduce this, and then we'll adjourn and recess, go to have the annual meeting, and then re-adjourn after the annual meeting. Excuse me?
Sorry. I'm very pleased to be able to share information that we received last week from the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction about Holton Elementary, that they will be receiving the 2013-14 Wisconsin Title I School of Recognition Award. And what's really significant was Holton was identified as both a high-achieving school and a high-progress school. Holton is only one of 6 schools in the entire state to receive both designations. So very, very significant. And I see Holton educators in the audience, and congratulations and kudos to each one of you. To reach this, or achieve this award, they had to score on the state report card in the top accountability index of significantly exceeding expectations. They had to work on closing gaps for students in various subgroups, and they had to meet all other, or exceed all other indicators. You know, I know Holton and the staff have worked very collaboratively together to raise their own expectations for performance, to raise the expectations for the performance of their students, and they have been diligent working together to accomplish that, meaning that so many more students are learning at higher levels, and certainly we congratulate them. I look at the teachers in the audience and think of the level of teacher leadership that's represented at Holton, and guided and led by Principal Ann Mitchell. Certainly her leadership has helped the school achieve this as well. On October 8th, Principal Ann Mitchell and School Counselor Christian Ziebel will travel to the state capitol and receive the award on behalf of the students and staff and families of Holton from the state superintendent, Tony Evers. So Ann, would you come forward and talk about what you've done at Holton to have so many students achieving at such high levels?
Thank you for a few moments of recognizing our students, our staff, and the families and community volunteers at Holton. We truly believe it takes a village, and this community is really illustrative of that. I asked them after this was announced, pardon me, what they thought contributed, and we asked students too, to the students learning at high levels. And I'm going to share with you 6 of the most commonly mentioned responses to that question. Number 1, and it's my favorite, hardworking and curious students who encourage and challenge each other to reach high levels. They enjoy learning, exploring, discovering, creating, and sharing their learning with others. We learn something from our students every day. Secondly, a cohesive and small learning community where, as the Cheers theme song says, everybody knows your name. Sometimes that doesn't work to students' advantage. Thirdly, a dedicated staff committed to continually improving their practice and helping their colleagues do the same. Fourthly, strong collaboration within and between grade levels and within and between all of our elementary schools. We learn a lot from our colleagues in every building. And fifth, system and district-wide support for professional learning across the board. And sixth, and truly not least, we would all attest to, coming off of an HPA meeting last night, a very involved, positive, and supportive parent and community behind us. So thank you very much for recognizing that.
Thank you.
I think that we definitely need the Holton staff to stand up and be recognized for this work, effort, and accomplishment. So kudos to each one of you.
Congratulations and thank you for your wonderful work. We sincerely appreciate it, and we're proud of the work that you're doing and the representation that you give to our district. I'm going to then entertain a motion to go to recess and to come back then and take action after the annual meeting tonight, including 6B, which is the senior last day of school and graduation date, and C, the consent items. So we'll take care of those items after the annual meeting, if that's all right, so we can have some time to prepare ourselves for the annual meeting. So I'll entertain a motion to that effect.
Move to approve?
Second.
Motion by Lynn, seconded by Sandy. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. We're adjourned for now. Okay, thank you.
All right, I don't have it in front of me actually right now, but I can go for it. So we looked at graduation dates and, thanks. So we looked at graduation dates. There's been, if you just look at some of this data, we're looking at when the seniors graduate versus the last day of instruction. And our last day of instructions are going into like mid-June, and there's been a lot of suggestions, kind of a groundswell of suggestions around moving high school graduation up, even if the 9th, 10th, 11th graders extend out. Can we move up the last day of instruction for seniors and also the graduation date, so that they're not graduating in mid-June, but they're graduating in the first part of June. And the idea is, you know, these graduates are going on to the next phase of their life. They may have summer jobs to get some funds for their next step in their life's journey, and just making it mid-June seemed to be more and more problematic. So if you look at the data, on the first sheet is the graduation dates. I would have your eyes go to the column that says graduation. And you can see our graduations in Hudson in 2012 and 2013 were June 9th and June 15th correspondingly. You can see the other graduation dates in the CISA. Most of them are either end of May or beginning of June. So we're kind of, you know, we're kind of inconsistent there compared to our, you know, to our schools in the vicinity. So then, what we decided as a committee and the administration leadership is, hey, let's just do a kind of socialize. Let's do a survey with parents of seniors and seniors. Did that survey go to faculty too, Mary? No, this survey was, and you can see the results of that, and it wasn't just, it wasn't even close. If you look at the, there was so heavily weighted to move up the last day of instruction. It's right up here. Move up the last day of instruction, move up graduation date. There's a lot of great comments, and hopefully you all had a chance to read through them. Even people didn't, and you know, there was some interesting comments on both sides, but there was just an overwhelming number of comments to support this. Some of the big things were making sure that you can, there was a little concern around the state track meet to make sure that that we provide the ability for, you know, if we did move it up, we looked at the different state meets for our athletes, and we want to make sure that, you know, maximum number of, you know, graduates can walk across the stage. And interesting is the state track meet is one that kept coming up because we have a lot of seniors that attend that, a lot being, I think, was in the 20s. But the good news is it's the state track meet's actually down in La Crosse, I believe, and even graduation date, even if we had a ceremony, you know, at 7, I think it is, or yeah, you would have a chance to get back. So, so then so you can read through those, and so that's interesting comments there. And so we spent a lot of time talking about it, and it seemed like, is it, you know, we would like to do a pilot, a one-year pilot, move up the last day of instruction for seniors. It's not affecting the rest of the classes, and move up the graduation date. Do as a one-year pilot, and there seems to be a lot of reasons to do it. There's a few reasons that's a challenge, but I think most of the challenges we can work around: the senior party, the state track meet, and so that was some of the data, and that was the recommendation from both the Learning and Program Development Committee and the district leadership. So maybe take some questions, or if there's any details you want to fill in, Mary?
You did very well, so I just have a couple. One is that the recommendation from the committee is to move the time from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock,
Yeah.
just because of the state track meet, to give those students more time, and we proved it at last graduation that we can have graduation at 8 o'clock, and it works with the senior party. So that was the recommendation of the committee. Principal Peg Shoemaker will be, with the board's approval, bringing a team of teachers together to talk about implementation and working through the details that the staff will need to work through with taking care of students and making the adjustments that are necessary based on this timeline. And then we would look at evaluating it at the end of the year and making a decision for the future.
I may have missed it, but there were 2 dates they were talking about, last day of instruction,
Yeah.
and then a date of
Yeah, so
graduation.
the last day of instruction would be June 5th,
Okay.
And then the graduation date that would be a Thursday, June 5th, and then the graduation date would be Saturday, June 7th.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions or?
Mr. President, so what would our educators do during that time frame in between last day of instruction
That was
and?
one of the concerns is, how do we, how do we use that time to kind of move things forward? Right? And Mary, you want to comment on that?
Well, one of the things that this team of teachers, along with the principal, will be doing will be contacting other districts that are already doing this and have been doing it for years. So that's part of the things that they will talk about on that committee and make recommendations to the rest of the staff.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I have one more, and it may be that it's not germane to this actual topic for action, but are we looking at all about the end of school year in relation not to seniors on that committee level?
That thing is a different topic, and it's been brought up by, it's been brought up around this topic, was, just looking at the calendar, but I think that's kind of a separate conversation.
And just to add on to that, the committee's asked that we look at next year's calendar, but not this year's current calendar, because people have made decisions, families have made decisions based on the calendar.
Okay.
Mr. President?
Yes. Gene?
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that because that was certainly one of the issues. I mean, just looking in how we compare to area schools and how much later we are than them, I think that for the next year's calendar, this is a one-year pilot. I think we want to stress that. And so that if it didn't work out because the underclassmen are staying an extra week longer than seniors, then we could look at maybe changing the school year for everyone to get it earlier in the year. I think the other point to be made is that we've done this in the past. There are teachers that had come up to me and told me that Hudson did this before, and they found a way. It works for some, maybe not for all, but obviously there's a lot of districts that are letting their seniors out at least a week before. In some cases, a couple cases here, it's 2 weeks before the rest of the students. So they must find a way for the teachers to do something in that time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I see there's some language from the Learning and Program Development Committee regarding the recommendation if that wants to be used in the form of a motion, if that's acceptable to your presenting group here. Do you see that?
Yep. Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that 2014 last day of school for seniors to be Thursday, June 5th, with graduation 8 p.m. on Saturday, June 7th. The school calendar for freshmen, sophomores, and juniors would remain as previously published, with the last day of school on June 12th, and this would be a one-year pilot.
Okay, good.
I second that.
Okay, so we have a motion by Brian and a second by Jamie that, I'll just read it real quickly, that a one-year pilot for early graduation for seniors only, 2014 last day of school, for seniors to be Thursday, June 5th, with graduation at 8 p.m. on Saturday, June 7th. The school calendar for freshmen, sophomores, and juniors would remain as previously published with the last days of school on June 12th. Is that acceptable, Brian, or?
Yes.
Okay. All right, that's the motion, so. Any other discussion? Okay. All in favor of the motion signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed signify by saying no. I have to get used to that. Motion passes, okay. All right, moving on. Thank you for the good work on that. I've heard from parents myself regarding that, and I think it's a good move for us. Okay, moving on to consent items, and then I'll entertain a motion to accept the consent items for approval with specific language around the expenditures, if I could.
Mr. President, I have a spouse that was part of the band camp, the one-week band camp, and she received a modest stipend for that. So as a result of that, and I'm going to recuse myself for this particular action item.
Great, thank you, Dan. I assume you won't be making the motion then?
Mr. President,
Yes, Lynn.
I'd like to move to approve the consent items and that the Director of Financial Services be authorized to pay bills in the amount of $1,144,690.79.
Okay, thank you. There's been a motion by Lynn. Second by Brian. All in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, say no. Okay, motion passes. I'm going to suggest that we forego, welcome back, Dan. I'm going to suggest that we forego the committee reports just due to the lateness of the evening, and unless there's any dying desire to hear. I had a pretty good report. Okay. All right. So hearing no opposition to that, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Motion by Brian,
Second.
second by Sandy.
I'll second.
Sandy. Okay, all in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
And opposed, say no.
I don't like yes thing. I don't know. Is that a new?